Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Steve Zimmerman, the founder and CEO of Restaurant Realty Company, which I founded 26 years ago in 1996. Since founding Restaurant Realty, we have sold more restaurants than any other broker in California. For those of you that are new to our webinar, we encourage questions from our listeners, which you can ask by going to the question link on the bottom of your screen. We will try our best to answer all questions, time permitting, and if we run out of time, we'll get back to you after the webinar to respond to your questions. As society is opening up, hopefully in a continued post-COVID environment, the restaurant industry is starting to recover, and although we have completed over 200 deals since COVID began our sales activity is continuing to accelerate. This is largely a result of a strong group of associates we have working with Restaurant Realty. And today I'm happy to co-host today's episode with Jim Pate, one of our strong selling associates. Jim's multifaceted background, from his tour of duty in the United States Marine Corps, to restaurant operations, to food service sales, to restaurant ownership, has served him well in becoming a very successful restaurant sales agent. Jim's experience includes an extensive internet marketing background, and coupled with that, his high motivation and his can-do attitude, this has all served him very well to becoming one of our most successful agents in the relative short period of time that Jim has been with our company. Our format today will be discussing a number of relevant questions we think you will be interested in learning about, which were put together by Jim and reviewed by me. After I state the questions, both Jim and I will respond to them. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Jim, who will give you a more detailed background about himself. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
My pleasure to have you.
A little background about myself. My name is Jim Pate. I'm a certified business broker and listing transaction agent for Restaurant Realty here in Northern California. I started washing dishes when I was 14 years old, and I never forgot that job. It taught me some things about the restaurant business, which is a work ethic, and it really just took hold of me. And I tried other things, and I just kept coming back to the restaurant business, because it was in my blood, so to speak, at an early age. The next adventure that I had was joining the Marine Corps at a very early age. And that was, needless to say, that was a very interesting time in my life. I went to Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. And then after that—
How old were you, Jim, when that happened? How old were you when you joined the Marines?
17 years old.
Wow, just a baby.
Yeah, well, my mom wasn't there anymore, so to speak. And they didn't promise me a rose garden either. I was in MCRD San Diego, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and then I was stationed in Camp Pendleton to a weapons platoon as an M60 machine gunner, rifle expert, and 3.5 rocket launcher, which is in the old days was a bazooka. And so I learned lots of things at an early age, but one of the things that I learned most from the Marine Corps was how to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I've used that my whole life, especially in restaurant deal making. I mean, every deal that I've had to improvise, I've had to adapt and overcome. I mean, I think you can't even do a deal unless you do those things. What do you think, Steve?
No, I agree. I mean, there's always new challenges on every deal that comes about, for sure.
Well, I'm just saying, after my time in the Marines, I went back into what was my desire, which was restaurants. And I worked in a place. In the old days, used to work in a place, learn experience, and then go apply it in another place. So I would get a job as a cook, and then I would learn really well, and then I would move up to like a dinner cook, and then I would go to like a kitchen manager position in another place. And so I did that for a couple of decades. A couple of the places I'd like to highlight was Fat City in California Fats in Old Sacramento, and Harrah's Lake Tahoe. Fat City, I worked there, And then I was just working there training to open up California Fats, which was the Fat family in Old Sacramento. They owned and operated that. It was a China camp, and then they converted it to a new Asian program, East meets West, as they said. And so I learned quite a lot of things from a variety of different people in that job that was fascinating. And I learned buffets at that job. And then I was recruited to go to Harrah's Lake Tahoe and work in the convention center, which was, it was very, very interesting and exciting. We used to do movie stars. We used to do things. And my job there was cold presentations and ice sculptures. We used to do parties on the lake in Bill Harrah's old house. I say his old house. It was $20 million mansion, right down from where they filmed The Godfather, part of The Godfather. So it was an interesting time. But after that, I used those skills and got a job as a food service salesman. And that turned out to be the first many jobs in that arena. I worked with restaurant owners, 20 to 30 restaurant owners weekly. And I took my experience that I learned and tried to help them be more successful. And that's how I applied myself to food service sales and for the next 20 years. And then my wife and I, we started our own restaurant called Cottonwood Eatery, a breakfast, lunch, and dinner place, which we owned and operated for 10 years. And I would say after that, how I met you is an interesting story. It blends from the experience that I had, and how I came to meet you was we were going to go to Hawaii on a vacation, and my wife and I were thinking about selling our restaurant, but I didn't know anything about selling restaurants. I had more questions than answers. So I actually Googled how to sell your restaurant, and your book came up, which was a restaurant Dealmaker. And I thought, well, I've got 5.5 hours to kill on the airplane at least. And so I thought I would, I downloaded that to a Kindle version, and I read it. I read on the airplane, coming over and coming back, and on the beach a little bit, just a little bit on the beach. And then I called you and explained our situation, and you paired me up with your top agent at the time, which was a delightful British bloke by the name of Keith Simpson. And I worked with him, and we worked, I learned a lot about the process, actually just working with Keith. And then about 7 or 8 months, we were able to sell the place. So I thought that was pretty good. And I was very interested in the process. I thought, this might be something that I would like to do. So I continued to give leads to you and Keith, and to the point where I called Keith up and I said, if I'm going to give you all these leads all the time, I might as well work for your company. And he says, why don't you? And he set me up with an interview with you in San Francisco.
Right.
And,
I think we met in Livermore, didn't we?
Yeah.
Livermore in a hotel, right?
Yeah.
Lobby, right? That was my first introduction to you, firsthand.
Well, I mean, I learned from Keith quite a lot, and his recommendation and your mentorship, I would say, are the two things that helped me be successful with Restaurant Realty. So I thank you very much for the position. I love what I do, and you helped me sell my restaurant, and now I'm helping other people sell theirs. So it's a perfect match.
It's been a pleasure working with you, Jim, and you've got a great positive attitude, and that really is, the underlying motivator, I think, to be successful in anything is to just be motivated and, have this can-do, think out of the box, thinking, which has obviously led to your success very quickly. I mean, you're doing the production now that, usually takes, agents 5-6 years to do. I think you've been with us a couple of years, so results speak for themselves. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, thank you, Jim, for that very nice introduction. Jim has put together some questions, and so I'm going to go through them. The first one is, what do you like best about being a restaurant deal maker? So first Jim will respond and then I will respond. So Jim, the floor is yours.
Oh, what I like best about being a restaurant deal maker is working with buyers and sellers. We work with buyers and sellers every day. And I enjoy helping a seller move on to the next adventure in their life. And it could be, I just try to find out what they want. And then I motivate myself to help them get that. And it keeps it simple for me and everything else. Everything else falls in place when I just try to work on their behalf and get what they want. I just sold, I just helped a person sell his restaurant after 30, he owned it for 37 years. And he told me, I said, what's your dream? What do you want to do? And he said, well, I just want to buy a motor home, take my family and just go across the country. And I said, okay, well, then that's what we're going to work on. We're going to sell your restaurant. And we sold his restaurant for more money than, we got involved with one bank and I just didn't think that was enough. So we got another bank involved. We ended up selling his restaurant for more money. And we found several buyers for it right away. And so he was very happy and him and his wife are doing really well right now. And I think that's just a part of the business that really excites me and motivates me and energizes me to keep doing. So that in all the history that I had that I just explained is it sort of validates that. This is what I've done and this is how I'm helping people with it. So that's what I like best about being a restaurant deal maker.
Okay, thank you. Well, very well said. So I'll sort of just amplify a little bit what Jim said. From my perspective, I share a lot of what Jim just said. This is people interaction, dealing with the buyers, dealing with the sellers, dealing with the landlords, dealing with everybody else. You're dealing with diverse personalities. Everybody's got their own shtick in terms of how they look at things and how they negotiate. So, and every deal has some difference, new people, new challenges. So every deal is a new experience. I don't think there's one deal that replicates another. And that what makes it, very interesting from being a restaurant deal maker's perspective. Then also one of the underlying things that I really enjoy is I love to see a liquidity event. In other words, when we sell the business and the seller reaps a nice profit from all his years of effort and hard work. So that's a real pleasure to see that occur. And also it's a real pleasure to see a new buyer become successful in their new business. So those are basically some of the highlights of why I like being a restaurant deal maker. So question number 2, what did your mom and dad teach you that helped you most with deal making? That's a good question, Jim.
Oh, geez. I would say my dad, I got something, you get things from your parents, some things stick. My brother didn't get it, but I did. I got from my dad a sense of work ethic. I mean, he was always very good with that. And I think that just came across in the genes. And so I would say I got a sense of work ethic and drive from my dad. And from my mom, I got a sense of caring and also the huge desire to help people. So, I've used that, and I've used that my whole life. It's just kind of inside you, and you kind of want to get out. And my grandmother, who I remember to be 70 years old, and I was 7, she had 10 people in her family, 8 boys and 2 daughters from Texas. She cooked from early in the morning till late at night, and I saw that, and somehow it just stuck in me. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. She's able to please all these people. And I thought, that was something worthwhile. And so I think that kind of gave me the passion for cooking that also. So my mom, dad, and grandmother really sort of set the tone for me to be a restaurant broker right now. So I appreciate that.
Oh, that's very interesting. Cool. Yeah, for me, my father, had a number of restaurants when I was a little kid. So he would, on Saturdays, encourage me to go in the restaurants with him. He was doing, I guess, just visitation to meet with the manager, whatever. And he would direct me to the back of the kitchen when I was 8 years old to grind meat, in the meat grinder. And then after we double ground the meat for hamburger meat, I would scoop it up, put it on 6x6 waxes, and then smush the meat so we'd have hamburgers. So I started doing that at 8 years old, started making milkshakes. I started cutting apple pies, putting the pie cutter on top and cutting the pies. So he got me indoctrinated very early. And then my mother, she instilled a great responsibility into me. I had daily chores around the house. I had to go out and sweep the common areas of the house every other day or so. And then she made sure that I did these chores, she made sure I practiced the piano every day for half an hour. She would take me to dancing school, Hebrew school, and she wouldn't let me drop out of Boy Scouts until I had obtained an Eagle Scout rank. So she had a lot of motivation to me to basically be responsible and finish things that I started, as much as I wanted to, quit Hebrew school, quit dancing school, quit piano lessons, and quit Boy Scouts. But she basically said, hey, you need to do these things. And that served me well in terms of keeping me responsible. And then when I turned 14, I got the opportunity to get a part-time job. I wanted to go to a Boy Scout Jamboree. It cost a few $100s to go. My father said, yeah, I think you should earn the money yourself. Why don't you work at your cousin's gas station on Saturday? So I did that. Then when I turned 15, I started washing dishes. And so again, my mother and father had a big impact in instilling responsibility to me, and which has led to, I think, my success in being a pretty successful deal maker. So, okay, third question. What qualities should you look for in a restaurant broker? Jim?
Oh, I think without a doubt, integrity is an integrity, honesty, and is the best foremost thing. You got to make a good deal for both buyer and seller. Your job is just to really do that, to keep everybody on track to the end. The buyer hands the seller a bag of money, and the seller hands the buyer the keys. And so you don't want a restaurant broker to just take your listing. You want a restaurant broker to tell you what he thinks your restaurant will work for in the marketplace. You want to represent both the buyer and seller the best that you can, and do the best job for both buyer and seller. An old person told me, if it's not a good deal, Jimmy, for both people, it's just not a good deal. So I would say integrity and follow through are the two biggest qualities I would look for in a restaurant broker.
All right, good point, Jim. I agree with Jim. But additionally, if I would be looking for a restaurant broker, I would prefer to have someone that's actually owned a restaurant, because he would basically put himself in the shoes of the owner of the restaurant. He's been there. He has empathy, understands all the trials and tribulations that go into running a restaurant, dealing with the people, dealing with systems, consistency and execution of, good food, good service, quality, environment, et cetera. So someone that's actually, I think it's imperative, someone that's been a restaurant owner or has had extensive management experience. And of course, another one I think that's very important is you want a restaurant broker that has had a track record of selling many restaurants, because they've been through the process and they understand all the nuances that are required to be successful in completing the transaction. Okay. So next question. What advice would you give young entrepreneurs wanting to enter into the restaurant business? That's a real good question. Yeah.
Well, listen, what I said motivated me to be a restaurant deal maker is, I talked about the seller, but I also enjoy working with the buyer. I've helped many buyers, sort of live their dream, and I get to live that dream by proxy, by helping them. And I really, really enjoy that. It sort of validates all the trials and tribulations that I had, learning and growing and doing in the restaurant business. I get to help someone else start that adventure, and it's very exciting. It's very motivating. But you can fail in the restaurant business. So what I like to do is try to prepare the buyer as best I can. And I would tell any buyer that the first thing that you need to enter into the restaurant business is passion. You've got to really, really feel like this is something that you really, really want to do. I mean, there's so many things that you can do in life. So I would say if you're going to do the restaurant business, having passion will sustain you when things get challenged, when things are hard, which they will be. And so if you have a big enough why, you'll probably figure out the how. And so that's the first step. And the second step is you got to know whatever industry that you're in. Like a coffee shop is different than a steakhouse, for example. You need to know what your matrix or numbers are, your industry standards, so that you can make sure that you match that. I would say to everyone that you have to be able to measure before you can manage. And then the third is create systems that create successful operations, create systems, and then find good people to manage those systems. And you have a very good chance at success in the restaurant business.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll ditto what Jim just said, but I'll add that, I think to be real in terms of approaching this industry, you need to have experience in the business. To an outsider that's never had restaurant experience, it looks very enticing. You see a lot of people coming in, you see the cash register, going ka-ching, ka-ching, and you think, oh my God, this is a great way for me to make a lot of money and be financially secure, et cetera. But the realities are the margins in this business are very small. So to really learn the business, you got to learn it from the inside out. You got to have front of the house experience, got to have back of the house experience, meaning, working in the kitchen, working in the front of the house, serving people, working at the bar, if you have a bar, learning management responsibilities. You should have a taste of all these different areas before you dive in as an owner, because the success rate is very small for independent, non-franchised restaurants. Maybe 20% after 5 years will succeed. There's just so many obstacles and challenges to be successful. So nothing like experience. And you got to be prepared to work long hours. You're working when everybody else is playing. You're working on in the evenings. You're working on holidays, on weekends, and so the silver lining on that is you can take days off when everybody's working. So you won't you can have more flexibility going places without having a lot of crowds because everybody's working when you're off. So those are some of the general thoughts I have in regards to entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs getting into this business. And I will say that a lot of new generation people, Generation Xers and millennials, et cetera, they don't want to be in the business. It's just too tough. They would rather do something that is less physical and do something that is, gives them more flexibility. So I'm seeing a lot of situations. A lot of our clients they have kids, they've worked in the business, and they don't want to continue to be in the business. In fact, I just got off the phone with a gentleman that has a business he's owned for 45 years in Tahoe. And his daughter has been working in the business, but she just had a baby. She's going to have another baby. And he thought that maybe the business would be right for her. But now she's thinking, Dad, I don't know if I can do this restaurant business and start raising 2 kids. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And so it's, you got to balance your business life with your social life. So you got to really look very carefully before jumping into this industry. Okay, Jim has put together top 5 questions that he gets asked as a restaurant broker. 4 questions, excuse me. Number 1, how much is my restaurant worth? Jim?
Oh, I think that's $1 million questions, or in some cases, $100,000 question. If you're going to try to sell your restaurant, the first thing that you need is a realistic price of what it's worth. And that has to match the market. I remember you telling me, Steve, that I was saying, well, this restaurant owner says his restaurant is worth X amount of dollars, and you said you tell him that your restaurant is worth what the market will pay for it. And so what our job is to do is to help the seller or the restaurant owner or the bar owner figure out what the best price for the market. If we price it too high, it's just going to sit there. If we price it too low, we've not done the best job for them. So we have developed a broker's opinion of value, which takes all the finances and puts them in perspective. And we work with the seller to get the P&Ls and the tax returns. and we get this information and we come up with what we call a defendable price. And if the seller agrees, then we can go to the next process, which is the listing and the marketing. But I would say our broker's opinion of value in the paint by number systems that we have has served us well into defining the value in the marketplace for the restaurant owner.
Okay, well said. Yeah, so, because we've been doing this for so many years and we've done over 1,400 transactions, we have a pretty good database of sales comps. Obviously, there's been some real challenges coming up with value in this post-COVID environment because most restaurants' performance were, zilch to negligible in 2020. 2021 has been a recovery year, and then hopefully 2022 will be on some pace to be similar to 2019. So at this time, more than ever, you need an experienced restaurant broker because there's a lot of creative mechanisms that go into, doing a weighted average approach to value. And how do you deal with 2020 and 21? And again, what's 22 going to look like? So again, based upon our experience and actually selling, a large number, again, over 200 deals we've done during COVID, we pretty much know what the market will bear. And so that's sort of how we go about it. We do a formal broker opinion of value, and whether it's an asset sale, meaning it's not making money, we have one approach. If it's making money, we use the going concern method, which is a multiple of seller's discretionary earnings. So if any of you would like to know more about these two methods, please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd be happy to walk you through the process. Okay, question number 2, again on frequently asked questions of a restaurant broker. Do I need a broker to sell my restaurant? Jim?
Oh, geez, I have, you have a lot more war stories than me, but the actual fact is you don't need a broker. You can try to sell it yourself, put it on Craigslist and do all kinds of stuff, but you're just asking for a lot of things that can go and will probably go wrong and which will cost you or could cost you a lot. I know a lady that tried to sell her restaurant. She thought she would save a commission. It cost her $80,000 because she just she didn't have all the answers. And I would say, do you need a broker? I said no, but I think one of the best things that to use a broker from Restaurant Realty is that we're going to keep this deal on track. We're gonna take the headache out of it. We're gonna do our best to ensure that it goes from point A to point B. We're gonna quarterback the deal. We're gonna oversee escrow. We're gonna look at the due diligence. A deal just doesn't go by itself. We're there and we monitor the deal and we help it along to closing. At the end, we want the buyer to give a bag of money to the seller and the seller to give the keys to the buyer and everybody be happy. And so that's a process, and we make it as we try to make it as painless as possible and for the seller and the buyer. So I would say, yes, you do need a restaurant broker. Yeah.
The landscape for doing a transaction is like a landfill, a landmine, a lot of bombs out there in the field. And you need someone that knows how to diffuse those landmines. And so, part of the process when we get a listing is we get the seller fills out a very detailed disclosure agreement. When the buyer writes an offer, they fill out a buyer's disclosure agreement. And it covers everything from A to Z. So there aren't any ghosts, hidden ghosts floating around that, we get everything on the table. So there's full disclosure, minimize legal, ramifications. I'm working on as an expert witness in a lawsuit now where I was hired by the attorney representing the seller. The buyer was basically dealt with a residential broker that hadn't had any experience selling restaurants. She did not make the proper disclosures, and the major issue was when the buyer bought the restaurant, he was not told that there was no health permit in the restaurant, and consequently, once he opened up, he assumed that he met the conditions of the health department because he was working under the auspices of the inexperienced broker. And the health department closed him down and he was closed down for an extensive period of time. The former owner had been operating without a health department. So that's just a tip of the iceberg of one of the reasons, there are a lot of moving parts, governmental clearances you need to get, that meets ADA, American Disability Act, accessibility requirements, the liquor license is transferred properly, the lease is transferred and protects the buyer. So many parts that are needed to minimize, and we more than pay for our fee. The extra money that we're going to get for the seller is going to exceed any kind of savings of commission that they may think they're going to get, because our marketing is going to be so much broader than what they're going to do. As Jim said, they may just throw it on Craigslist and take the first offer, and they may have underpriced their business substantially. So we handle most of our sales are confidential sales, and we know how to handle confidentiality. If you have an owner trying to sell his own restaurant, how's he going to maintain confidentiality when he's in the restaurant every day? And how's he going to stonewall the employees, et cetera? Trying to, deal with a buyer on one hand and trying to run his restaurant. So anyway, there's definitely a need for our services, without a doubt. Next question. How long does it take to sell a restaurant?
Oh, gee, that's a very good question. A lot of people are so impatient in today's society, they might have the impression that, okay, it's just like selling a house kind of thing, because houses can sell fast. But if you look on the statistics, I think we're right now averaging, I guess, 7 or 8 months till we get a buyer on board, and I would say that's pretty good, because the statistics say that if you're trying to sell your own restaurant, you're going to have a 2 in 10 chance of doing it successfully. So how long does it take to sell your restaurant? I think you're fortunate if you can sell it. And we're averaging 7 to 8 months right now at Restaurant Realty to get a qualified buyer into the process. I can tell you it will go faster if it's reasonably priced, and if the business is packaged or prepared to sell, and you have good books and records. We can help you do all that. We can help, and that's what we should do before we even list it, is to get it ready, get it prepared, and then we have a great marketing system already in place. So if we can package it well, then we have a really good chance of selling it. And I've actually put it up and then sold it the next day, or at least got a buyer the next day, and the process goes from there. So I would say, realistically speaking, if everything goes well, we can have a buyer on board in the first 7 to 8 months of the listing. What is your, Steve?
Yeah, I concur with that. I mean, there are situations where, it's a very hot opportunity, and, we get offers the first week, multiple offers, in which case we're able to close the deal. Again, there's an ABC license involved. We have to transfer the ABC license. That process adds about 6 to 8 weeks onto the process. So, but there have been situations where we have sold deals within 30, 45 days without a liquor license. But the norm is probably in the 6-month range or so. And again, the probability of in working with us is that, the chances of us selling it are going to be probably 3 times that if you were trying to sell it yourself. Main Street businesses, which are businesses that sell for under $1 million, only 20% of all businesses sell. Believe it or not, 20%. Our average is about 3 times that. So because of the added exposure you get from us, obviously it makes it cost effective to work with, Restaurant Realty. At this point, there are a couple of questions that came in. I'd like to just throw them out to Jim and myself and see what they have to say. Okay, question number 1 from the audience, and thank you for the questions. How are buyers evaluating the financials of a restaurant with 2 years of COVID implications included? Jim, you want to try that one?
Well, what we do, what buyers are doing is they're looking at, I would say you look before COVID, like say 2019, and look at a benchmark. What was the restaurant doing there when the pandemic wasn't around? And then, and what what will it be likely on the trend outside of it? Is it going towards that number? Is it going higher? But 2020 or during the COVID period, you have to take in consideration that all restaurants or most restaurants took a hit on that one. There are some restaurants that were heavily in the delivery, like some pizza places that had their delivery systems already. They enjoyed a bump from COVID, but most restaurants had trouble in 2020. So again, I would say, look at the benchmark of what they were doing before COVID, look at the trend afterwards, and then weight that. I would put more emphasis on 2019, and then I would look at the current trend, and if I was evaluating a restaurant as a good deal for me to buy. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you have to look at the type of restaurant it is. First of all, obviously takeout and deliveries and drive-through restaurants were less impacted. And in many cases, they did as much business, and in some cases even more business during COVID, if they were modeled to be primarily takeout and delivery before COVID. So in those cases, we don't have to make a lot of adjustments for 20 or 21, but in more cases than not, we do. And so we have to figure out the weighting of each year, what makes sense. If we see 2022 is on the upswing, then we're going to put a lot of emphasis on 2022, because the most current data is really most indicative of what the future will bring, subject to Ukrainian war, subject to, the recession, subject to all these unknowns that are floating around out there. But, obviously we want to be somewhat optimistic, but again, realistic. There are a lot of things that are changing in the world. So you can't just look at the first few months of 22, and if they're doing great, just assume the rest of the year is going to be great. There's just too many unknowns in there. But the bottom line is we are flexible in trying to be realistic and dealing with the economic situation at hand, and to try to maximize getting, the best possible price for the seller and a reasonable price for the buyer. Next question. Would you say it takes longer to sell a restaurant today, given the pandemic, endemic, and economic concerns? Jim?
Oh, I think it is entirely on a case-by-case basis. If you have a profitable restaurant, or we sell it as a going concern. If it's profitable, then it's, I would say, easier to sell, as opposed to a restaurant that is an asset sale and priced too high, for example. Or there's something wrong with it, or the rent's too high. If there's some major problems with it, it's going to be harder to sell. I think what you have to do from the seller's point is be able to package. When I was talking about packaging, you have to look at all the concerns. If the rent is too high, could we get a new lease and negotiate that with the landlord to make it more than? Is there some things in there that we could use to maybe make more revenues from the place that the current owner is not doing, or the new buyer could? I would say that, well, it's on a case-by-case basis, and I think it has to do with the pros and cons of the specific deal at hand. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah. By the way, Jim, the last minute or two, your internet connection is not stable for some reason. Did you move around or something, or I don't know what happened? But anyway, because I got that message, I heard it, and I got the message from our technical people. So it's obviously coming from your side. I agree with what Jim said. Every deal's got its own challenges, and I would say basically, especially if you're trying to do an SBA loan, SBA lenders want to see a seasoned performance post-COVID. So, if you plan to do SBA, they're going to want to see, several months, 6 months minimally of performance, post-COVID, before they'll move forward in that regard. So it is definitely adding a challenge. Next question. What is the cost to get started with Restaurant Realty Company? Jim?
Oh, that's the best part. We are 100% success fee oriented. If we don't sell your place, it doesn't cost you anything to get started with us. Most business brokers charge from 10 to 15%. Some charge even more And some people charge for the evaluation from $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 for that. We don't charge normally for the evaluation, and we don't charge you to market it. We believe in what we do, and if we take your listing, we believe that we can sell it, and that's why we would just charge a success fee, usually minimum of 10%, which is a standard in the industry. So I would say the cost to get started is nothing.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. There's nothing really more to say there. Okay. A few more questions here. First of all, what would you consider some of the best advantages Restaurant Realty Company has in selling your business? Jim?
Oh, I would have to say our relationships, our resources, and our industry knowledge.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, most of our agents or brokers have owned restaurants or managed restaurants. So collectively, we have hundreds of years of experience as owners and or managers of restaurants. So again, we have empathy in dealing with that. Our resources basically, are very extensive because of the number of transactions we've dealt with. We have, for example, 60,000 registered buyers in our database, and we communicate with them every week. In fact, if you're in our database, you should have gotten our e-newsletter today. It comes out every Thursday. We talk about new listings, featured listings, some of our featured agents, some of our recent done deals. So we're always communicating with our database, which is very important. Jim?
Well, the 60,000 registered buyers in a database is why you would use us as opposed to a real estate agent. Some rural areas or other areas, they might go to a real estate agent that they know. Hey, can you sell my business for me? Can you sell my restaurant? Thinking, hey, they sold my house, maybe they can sell my restaurant. And they won't have access to this. And they will probably only use the MLS. And when we have much more to be able to do than that. I would say one of the things that we have is an excellent reputation in the broker community. I saw brokers talk to you when we were at the conference in San Jose in 2019, Steve. And I think they just don't want to do restaurants. They would prefer to give them to you because of all the moving parts. So I think we have helped a lot of sellers sell their restaurants because brokers themselves, business brokers, would rather not have the hassle of it most of the time. You enjoy that. What would you say to that, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with Jim there. We get a lot of referrals from our residential brokers, general commercial brokers, and as Jim mentioned, business brokers that we know through the industry that don't want to sell restaurants. And we gladly pay referral fees to anybody that gives us a seller lead that we turn into a listing and we sell. So we're very receptive to doing that, and we will continue to do that. But I think one thing I'd be negligent if I didn't discuss was we have a whole staff. We have a project manager and all these are licensed agents that have lots of experience, working in the real estate industry or in project management, as is the case for our project manager. She also does deals. Gail, who's going to be our speaker, our guest host in our May deal making session. Our buyer manager has been with us for close to 10 years. She was formerly a real estate agent. She's the one that screens all the buyers to make sure that they are financially and operationally qualified before they're giving any specific information regards to the name and address of a restaurant, because most of our sales are confidential. We have an internet coordinator. We have a marketing team. So we have a whole team of people that do the various parts of our business to ensure that they're all done professionally and thoroughly, which most companies don't have. So that sort of gives us an added advantage to get to the goal line and continue to be successful in what we do. Jim?
Oh, well said, Steve. I have down here 26 years of experience getting the job done. And I would say you covered quite a lot of that, but we have cutting edge marketing programs that I think give us the edge over most of the competition and other people in the industry. And that's why they would prefer us to do, because they get a referral fee and they know that the job is going to be done well. What do you think about that, Steve?
Yeah, let me add to that. Yeah. What some of the things we do other than do these newsletters every Thursday is, once we obtain a listing, it goes on our website. It goes on to approximately 7-8 other business for sale websites. It goes into social media, to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And, again, these are, we basically introduce them as a new exciting listing. We don't talk about the specific name and address because, again, most of these are confidential unless it's a non-confidential deal, which we do occasionally if the restaurant's sold. The restaurant is closed. And then we do, if necessary, we do a targeted email blast to buyers that we think meet the criteria of the specific listing that we have. If we see that a listing's not moving properly, we'll develop a targeted email blast. We'll come up with anywhere from 200 to 500 specific people in our database that meet the criteria of this particular listing, and we'll email them a blind profile with a link to the profile with a link to our NDA. So this is something that really, I think, sets us apart, where we can specifically drill down to a specific database that meets the criteria for this specific listing. Those are the basic things that we do to get exposure, and consequently, we have a high success rate as a result of our extensive marketing team and our professional management team. Anything else you want to add, Jim, in that regard?
Well, I think that we have a proven process in place with everything that you just said. We have extensive disclosures, like you were mentioning earlier, that a seller will fill out, so we don't miss anything. Chances of us missing something, they'll have to not check the box. So a lot of people that aren't used to selling restaurants probably wouldn't even know some of the disclosures that we would even ask for. So we have the processes in place, we have the staff in place, we have the marketing, and we have years of experience of doing the job that makes us the pick, I would say, to sell your restaurant. To work with us is to work with people who know and care and want to do a good job and have all the things in place to be able to do that.
Well said. Thank you. We thought we would discuss, we don't have that much time left, but in any event, we thought we would discuss some of the frequently asked questions about selling your restaurant. First one is, how can SBA, which is the Small Business Administration, which is an arm of the government, which guarantees loans for small businesses. And I know Jim has had a very successful track record of dealing with SBA. And so, Jim, how can SBA help you sell your restaurant?
Well, the first thing I would like to say about that, Steve, is most of the sellers don't know how the process works. They think it's something like a house, like the buyer gets approved and then they go shop for restaurants to buy. In this case, as the SBA is concerned, they're a cash flow lender. The SBA doesn't actually lend the money. They guarantee the money to the bank, which gives the bank the appetite. The bank in the SBA rules say that they got to use federal income tax returns, not P&Ls. So if the business will flow, cash flow on the business tax returns, then the SBA will guarantee the loan and the banks will have an appetite to do it. So that will give the seller much more increase in the buyer pool. Because they only have to put anywhere from 10 to 25% down, and they will have a minimum of 10 years to pay. So that no bank will loan money for a restaurant usually. And so the SBA is a great way. If you've done everything and you put everything on your income tax returns, you should be able to get an SBA loan, and that will increase our buyer pool tremendously. So there are some red tape to get the SBA loan, and there's some length of time involved in it. But overall, I would say it puts more buyers into the pool, and it makes it easier for them to come up with less money and have longer period of time to pay for it. So that's my take on
Yeah.
The SBA part.
Yeah, I agree that. And one of the underlying criteria by SBA obviously is the business has to be profitable. It has to have a history of profit. Obviously, they'll do some adjustments for 2020 and part of 2021, but it's got to definitely show, positive cash flow and that it meets certain debt to loan criteria. It's got to be personally guaranteed. They like it collateralized so that if the buyer owns other property, they want it, collateralized on that property and on the subject business. And it definitely broadens the buyer pool from the seller's perspective, because again, if you only have to come up 20% down, if it's a $500,000 price, they're obviously a much bigger buyer pool that have, 20% of 500,000 is 100,000 that have 100,000 versus the buyer pool that has 500,000. So you maximize the opportunity for the buyer by having this program, and also maximizes the seller's opportunity to get a better price because there's a larger buyer pool. So there's some real advantages to dealing with SBA. But again, it's got to meet the criteria of the bank. So it properly funds, it properly pays the loan. Next question. Is this a good time to sell a restaurant?
Sure, go ahead. I would say, there's some talk about, if you want to sell your restaurant, maybe in the first of the year. A lot of people say, after the year is done, oh man, I want to sell my restaurant. I don't want to do another year like this. I got to pay my income tax. I got to do blah, blah, blah. I think really any time is a good time to sell your restaurant. But I would say really you should work in advance. You should, if you're thinking about selling your restaurant, you should start getting all your ducks in a row. I would think that would be the most important thing for you to start. So is a good time to sell your restaurant? I would say get prepared first, and then you'll know what time it is to sell your restaurant.
Okay, yeah, I concur with Jim. I mean, it's we do get a flurry of sellers. Usually the first of the year, they want to turn over a new leaf and, get on with the rest of their life. And so there is some added flurry the first, couple months of the year, but generally any time of the year I find is pretty much a good time. The only real dip may be sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. During, pre-COVID times, people are preoccupied with, shopping and parties and all the events that go along with the holidays. But other than that time, demand and supply is pretty constant throughout the year. So that's my take on that. So we talked during this time frame a little bit about a going concern sale, one that's making money, and an asset sale. So Jim, what is a restaurant asset sale, and how do you price an asset sale versus a going concern sale in general terms without going through a full-blown valuation?
Okay. Well, if a place is losing money or they can't show, they don't have good books and records, you just can't see. You said, well, you say you're making money, but you're not writing it down here, so we can't really prove it, And so if you can't really do it as a going concern sale, you sell it as what's called an asset sale. And that is usually a percentage of the gross. It can be anywhere from 17, 19 to 25%, and we take in consideration, you take in consideration the assets of the business, and you price it on a percentage of the gross sales. That's the closest thing that I could say that how we arrive at a value. What would you say, Steve?
Yeah, that's basically how it's done. However, can be some extenuating circumstances, like, for example, if you have a restaurant in San Francisco that does 500,000 in sales, it's losing money, and you would price it at 20% or 25% of sales, that's only 125,000. And they have a hard liquor license, it's worth 250,000. So obviously you have to make some adjustments in those kind of circumstances, because the liquor license is worth more than the price of the restaurant. So there are adjustments. It's not black and white. You have to make adjustments for those kind of situations. And that's where it's helpful to employ, a professional restaurant broker that know the nuances and how to make the proper adjustments accordingly. And so the next question, how much should I sell my restaurant for?
Well, that is I should say the $1 million question or the $500,000 question. We generally sell 2 to 3 times the discretionary earnings or the cash flow of the business. So if you wanted to sell, if you had $200,000 in cash flow in your restaurant, you could probably look to sell it for $400,000 to $600,000. I'll just kind of round it out like that. 2 to 3 times the seller's discretionary earnings or cash flow of the restaurant would be a reasonable marketplace to start in the marketplace.
Yeah, and just to add that the definition of cash flow, for those of you that, there are different perspectives on cash flow, but the way we look at cash flow is all the benefits, the financial benefits that the owner gets out of the business, his salary, car allowance, health insurance, life insurance. If he goes out and eats out a lot at other restaurants and he deems that as research and development to fine tune his menu, that would be a legitimate expense. Depreciation is added back, amortization, if there's a loan, amortization, interest expense is added back. If he had an inordinate amount of legal fees because he had a lawsuit, those inordinate amount of legal fees would be added back. Similarly, if he had an audit and he had extraordinary accounting, the extraordinary accounting fees would be added. So all these factors are filtered into what we call, as Jim alluded to, seller's discretionary earnings, and we take a multiple of that. The multiples will vary depending upon the degree of risk of the business and how hard it is to operate it, et cetera. We have numerous other questions, but I think because of the time running out here, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And I thank Jim for your participation and the great responses that you gave us. If you want to reach Jim in the future, Jim, please tell them how to reach you.
Well, you can reach me at 530-209-4267. That's my cell number. And you can also email me, jim@restaurantrealty.com.
Thank you.
I would say, if you're 6 to 12 months out, let us evaluate your restaurant for free to see what would be a good price. That's a good start for you to look at that time. And if you just have questions, give us a call. And I would think that would be, we're going to save you time and we're going to save you money by just talking to us. And it doesn't cost you a thing.
Thank you, Jim. And again, if you want to reach me, my cell phone number is 415-720-5468. And my email is steve@restaurantrealty.com. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Stay safe, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. Thanks.